And we're once again focused on cybersecurity with one of our cybersecurity pros, Richard Stiennon from IT Harvest. Also a prolific book writer with his security yearbooks. I think the new edition is out now, right, Richard?
The 2024 edition is out, and I am currently putting together the 2025, but I have to wait till the year is over before I'm done.
Yes, make good point there. All
Yep.
right, so let's talk about what is you sent us a list of some things you wanted to talk about. One of them is select blinds. Haven't had a chance to read that, so what is that all about?
Yeah, so Select Blinds, of course, is an e-commerce website where you go and buy blinds. And if anybody owns a house, they know how ridiculously expensive blinds are and what a pain they are. And speaking from personal experience because during COVID we adopted two kittens, and they like nothing more than eating the pull cords on blinds. And every blind costs minimum of $250, and the kittens were costing us a fortune. So anyways, you just go online, you go to select blinds, and you pick the color and everything else, and just like an e-commerce site, and get them shipped to your house. Well, they've had to report 206,238 of its customers had their personal data stolen.
Mm.
And this is not the typical ransomware attack that we hear about, where the data is stolen and encrypted and all the rest of that stuff. They installed malware on SelectBlind's website that just
Mm.
sat there and harvested for months, was harvesting people's details as they typed in their credit card, etc.
Oh,
So, so this is what's called a watering hole attack, and that's why I brought it up because you don't hear those very often. If you are a website owner, there are tools that you can subscribe to that will scan your site for these types of things because you don't want to, be responsible for either infecting people with malware or having their data stolen by using your site. So it's kind of your responsibility. Select Blinds should have known about that and done something about it. They didn't, and now they're
going to pay. I can already see the personal injury lawyers lining up,
yeah.
so 1-800 call somebody, right?
Exactly. Class action lawsuit.
Oh,
Yeah.
everything. Yeah. So what are those
So I,
tools?
I, I guess the advice to Select Blind's customers is monitor your credit card statements like a hawk, right? Because you might be seeing some funky charges out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Immediately start doing that. Um, you Mike, you were going to ask, what do you use? I use something from my hosting provider called Site Scanner. And I'm sure they're, just reselling me something. But
White labeled from somewhere else or
from
something.
somewhere else, but it's like, yeah, so they just provide the hardware that my website sits on. But the latest report was from today at 7/12. Site reported clean. So, and your site's not going to get affected with this stuff if you do all the other security that you should be doing about your website. Site Scanner is something you can purchase if you have a WordPress site. So it's just a plugin. So
Hmm. That
All right, so that's news from Bitdefender on Select Blinds. There's also been a hit on an oil field supplier. Why don't you tell us about that?
yeah, so this is a broader, has broader consequences, right? Because it's attacks on our critical infrastructure ultimately. It might remind you of the Colonial Pipeline attack, right? So it's
yeah.
also a
Oh,
ransomware
sure.
attack. Newpark Resources is, supplier of equipment to oil and gas. So I think of them as a mini Schlumberger or a mini NOV, which is already a mini Schlumberger. But big business, right? Supplying the pipes and the drill heads and all the rest, and they got hit by a ransomware attack. And it's becoming a little formulaic and how all of these report their failings essentially. As soon as they saw the attack, they instituted their incident response, and they did have to file with the Securities Exchange Commission because they're publicly traded. and notify them of this significant attack. Um, Basically, an unauthorized third party had gained access to some of its internal information systems. And you can just imagine what those are, right? It's going to be their customer data. Internal computer systems could be everything that they have. And then, of course, the ransomware part is going to include a demand for ransom.
Big money.
Yeah. So, just it was just funny. I was talking to an author this morning who was writing a book on all of his interactions with these ransomware gangs as he helps people negotiate with them. And he is talking to some government officials today. And I said, well, if they ask you, what the government can do to help, tell them that, allowing Ukraine to use U.S. cruise missiles to fire into Russia was the biggest thing they could have done to help. Because as I revealed on this program, and just a brain fart, I guess, the only way that ransomware is ever going to go away is if there's regime change in Russia. I wasn't calling for regime change. I was saying if Putin's
Richard
deposed.
Stiennon calling for a regime change. That means the FSB is going to be looking for you now. So.
That's right. That's right. I'm sure I'm on their list already. Um, but if there were a regime change, whoever the new regime is, whether it's everybody's pipe dream of a democratically elected government or just another oligarch stepping in, they will try and make nice with the West. They will blame Ukraine on that old guy, dead guy, Putin, and they will round up the ransomware guys, which is all good, And this author was going, yeah, that'd be good, but nobody would buy my book, would they? And go, yeah. And there'll be a lot of security companies, that I work with that will be out of luck because, like, if you don't see this in the news every day as we do, you're just going to think security's not as big a problem because it takes a lot of repeated hammering of just how serious these attacks are. And New Park Resources is only the latest to discover that.
Speaking of the Russians, now it isn't on your list of questions, but during the elections on November 5th, there was a whole lot of bomb threats called in. And I know that everyone was pointing the direction towards Putin. Do we know that is in fact the case? The Russians behind that, or could have been a whole bunch of different people, right?
Yeah, and certainly there could have been copycats who said, "Oh, what a good idea! You can do that." So there were 60 bomb threats called into the critical swing states, um, and obviously, concerted, planned effort. They're essentially swatting the election, either the counting centers or the voting centers, causing quite a few of them to be shut down for a period of hours, or in delaying their ultimate closing by hours, so people could get their votes counted. So yeah, that was pretty pat election interference so far. I've not seen any follow-up action from authorities to demonstrate that it was Russian, other than some of the notifications came from RU addresses, which Russian domains, and that's not very sophisticated if that's the case, and could easily have been by anybody who was stupid enough to do something like that, sending emails from their Russian account they got at a Russian email provider. So, as usual, attribution is extremely difficult for us lowly civilians. Of course, as I point out quite often, if the state or if the intelligence community truly has a universal dragnet for collecting information on every individual, they also have an attribution engine that they can use to prove this stuff. And they rarely, rarely do come out of the woodwork and tell us that, yeah, those are the bad guys, because it reveals their techniques and their sources. So they don't want to reveal that.
So elsewhere in cyber attack land, I guess, There
Cyber
is
attack,
a
Glenn. I like that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, there's a grocery distribution giant that I had never heard of before, Ahold Delhaize, that had a cyber attack as well. Tell us a little bit about that if you
Yeah, so but you've probably heard of Giant Food, Food Lion. I think we actually have those here in Michigan. All of those brands belong to this big holding company,
Hmm.
and all of them posted notes on their websites saying that they were having issues with pickup and delivery due to system outages. But then they've revealed since then that this was a ransomware attack. So we don't know if one, if they've had to pay a ransom. Um, they they talked about it. They're working with law enforcement. Um, and it sounds like they were able to keep all the stores open, so they didn't get to the point of sale terminals. Which, if the cash registers go down, they have to shut the store. Um, there's, believe it or not, people don't have backup anymore. They can't accept cash. So, and likely there aren't very many people who can pay cash for groceries nowadays.
yeah.
So the other one, another one on your list, is City of Sheboygan.
Yeah, that got my attention because I'm from Wisconsin originally. And and this is noteworthy only because it's yet another municipality that has suffered a ransomware attack. By now, uh, they've all learned the formula. Now you immediately tell the authorities or whoever. Now, mind you, cities don't have a regulatory oversight like the oil and gas industry does, or a public company does, or even a grocery store chain does. And yet, they're still reporting and will notify people they claim if they think their data was stolen. I'm trying to think of what kind of data my city would have on me, and it's they'll have building records and tax records, of course, um, most of which are semi-public, anyways. But yeah, not good. And if they have to recover from from ransomware, then they're struggling with how they're going to pay that ransom. I should have started by saying this is Sheboygan, not Cheboygan.
Oh, of course, yes.
I was very surprised to discover that Michigan had a Cheboygan, and I've been camping there many times.
Hmm.
And
So,
you also mentioned a couple of attacks coming out of China. Talk to us about those a little bit.
yeah, and these are usually the ones that I try and focus on because there's so many bigger implications. So there's been a series of attacks on telecom providers, and unless you're going to cut me off in 2 minutes, I'll tell you the stories
No, no,
of
no.
two.
You run with the ball. Take
All
as
right.
much time as you need.
All right. So I'm taking you back to 2004 Athens, where the Summer Olympics were held. This was a extremely interesting cyber attack against Vodafone, who is the Italian or the Greek phone company. Um, and so phone companies, of course, have big phone switches in their central offices, and that's how incoming calls are routed to the recipient. Back in 2004, it was cell phones and it was landlines that Vodafone had to manage, and they purchased those switches from Ericsson. So leading up to the Olympics, the an engineer at the phone company got software updates for the switches, and he installed them. And over time, the combination of three or four software updates turned on something called lawful intercept. So in many countries, including the United States, the law enforcement can get a warrant, or in some countries, of course, they don't need warrants, but here in the United States, you need a warrant all the way up to a FISA court warrant to gather phone records and tap people's phone lines. And in the manufacturers of the switches, rather than make somebody go into a central office and find the copper pair like the old days and put a physical tap. The Ericssons of the world decided that we should make it easy for law enforcement to tap people's phone lines and give them a feature so they just do it in software. So that's exactly what Ericsson did. Now in Greece, they don't have the ability to do lawful intercept. The police aren't allowed to do that, which is a good thing, right? Across the board. So this malicious software updates that were being installed turned that on. And then the attackers used it to tap into the conversations of 100 people, mostly engaged. They're either athletes or they're managers or officials, judges, etc., for the Olympics in Athens. And you can imagine, it's nobody ever attributed who that attack came from. But if you think of how often Russia is involved in things to do with the Olympics because they hate being accused of doping their athletes, and they usually get kicked out of the Olympics because they continue to do that. And not to mention that Russian criminal gangs engage in a lot of betting on sports events. Wouldn't it be great if you had the inside scoop from the judges, the coaches, etc.? So probably Russia was responsible for that attack on Athens, especially since another telltale sign that it was Russia was that the engineer who was responsible for installing those software updates was found hanging in his apartment 3 days after the event was discovered. So killed in some way.
Wow, that's pretty. That moves it beyond in a whole different realm, then, doesn't it? So
completely.
yes.
Now, and then maybe he just didn't live on a high enough floor, or he would have joined the dozens of other people who have had accidents and fell out of.
Yeah,
It's funny how they get clumsy around windows, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Especially last night, it was a ballet star in Moscow who
that jumped through a window or
tripped and fell over the balcony balustrade. Yeah.
That wasn't the one that contributed the very small amount of money to some Ukraine fund, was it?
May have been, but he was criticizing the war in Ukraine.
Same thing. Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, I was going to say I had heard of a female ballet star in Russia who gave money to a Ukraine cause.
Okay.
But she's being held in prison.
Right. She would go to prison.
Yeah.
So this was the guy that suddenly sprouted wings.
Yep.
Interesting.
And as long as I haven't finished my story, but
keep going there. Yeah.
The clock is just moving. So let's talk about the defenestration attack of all time, for me anyways, or maybe I was naive and didn't know this went on all the time. But when you study cyber war, most books, including mine, though I mention this thing called the farewell dossier. And the myth is that during the Reagan administration, while the Soviet Union was still around, that a bunch of people in the White House were sitting around doing whatever they do, and somebody rushed in and he said, they've a nuclear bomb has gone off in Siberia. And an advisor to President Reagan said, no, that's not a nuclear bomb. That was us. And what us had done was infiltrate the oil and gas pipeline, manufacturer that made stuff for them in Canada, and change the control system software on these devices, such that when they are turned on, they would, overstress the pipeline and blow up. So cyber attack we're talking, 80s, so predating, the use of the internet and stuff. So you have to include that story. So I was researching that story, and it is well documented on the CIA's website, and that is the only source for that story.
Wow.
And I've looked carefully. I've looked at, hey, if it's true that a gas pipeline in Siberia blew up, then shouldn't the prices of gas spike in that time frame? They did not. Nobody's ever produced the satellite images that supposedly got everybody excited. So I suspect the whole story is made up by the CIA. So okay, so that's definitely a sidetrack there. But we're back in Athens. Athens attacked, lawful intercept turned on. These are the exact same kinds of attacks going on against U.S. phone companies. Think about it in Singtel, which of course is Southeast Asia phone company in Singapore. Um, but it's just systematically we're hearing about each phone company as it's hacked. The latest one is yet another hack on T-Mobile with the same uh, goal to record calls of specific T-Mobile customers, target private communication of certain individuals, and gain information about law enforcement surveillance requests, which of course they'd have access to those systems. They could see the records in the switches. So very, very serious, right? Nation state encroaching on our telecommunication systems. Uh, they don't have to deploy spy agents to install bugs in your hotel room. They can just find out your phone number if you're a T-Mobile user. But this group that we're calling Salt Typhoon have also attacked AT&T and T and Verizon and Lumen. They've also reported being affected by this. So pretty widespread attack. Yet another reason not to trust your cell phone if you're plotting, to overthrow the government, for instance.
Good to know. So
Yeah, so don't talk about it on your phone or, well, except it is China, right? They can't arrest you, but
they
um,
get arrested you for probably blinking in China. I don't know. So
yeah, if you're in China for sure. But
yeah, right.
I've always claimed it's like, hey, look at, would you rather your own law enforcement spies on you or a foreign national spies on you? And obviously,
Mm.
a foreign national, they can't do anything to you unless you're really important to them. But if your local police department is spying on you, then you got problems.
Indeed. Okay. So, getting back to your book, the 2025 edition's coming out in January. I know you got your new
No, no, no.
publisher, Wiley,
Yeah,
and so,
Wiley's the publisher. This is the current edition. Um, yeah, so I have to turn the entire manuscript in on the 13th of January. So
ah,
in order for them to, do the editing and typesetting and all the rest and get it to the printers, which is usually Sheridan Books in uh, Chelsea, Michigan,
Mm.
and then get the books to RSA in California by whenever the end of April, I think, is when that conference is. Very, very short time frame. They have a lot more pull with the printer than I do. The printer always quoted me 10 weeks, and I think we're going to do it in about 5 weeks. So this is post-COVID, and books have been really hard to print as a paper supply shortage.
ah. And if folks want to get that book when it comes out sometime in 2025, where do they go?
Yeah, just go to Amazon and make sure you order the latest book because it's literally a work in progress because I add to it every year. Though the unique thing of it every year is the data in there. So every book's got all the acquisitions in cybersecurity, all the investments listed in cybersecurity, and then all the companies and how much they grew. And the companies change about 10 or 20% every year. It's amazing. And right now, the book I just held up is there's a directory listing of 3,200 vendors. We're right now at 4,155 vendors. So
Wow.
it's not that the industry is growing that fast. We're just getting better with our processes for finding the vendors that are out there.
That's a lot of them. Yeah, I know it's a
It really
worldwide
is.
market, but still 4,000 and more than 4,000. That's amazing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I blame a lot of that on the reaction to Edward Snowden. And we might recall going, way back. I think when was it? 2008 that
Something like
um,
that.
he left the NSA and he leaked all that information. And it's not his fault that there's a reaction to it, right? It was the discovery that the NSA is spying on everybody's communications that caused this distrust of US telecom. And then for some very strange reason, our politicians decided that it behooved them to sow distrust of Chinese telecom equipment, even though there's absolutely zero instances of Chinese equipment being used to hack anybody. The only time Chinese equipment has been hacked to spy on somebody was when the NSA hacked it to spy on a group in Tunisia.
Hmm.
So, but anyways, there's showing distrust about telecom equipment. And of course, we had an abject demonstration that the U.S. spy organizations do intercept U.S. telecom equipment and change it. They insert chips. Gosh, somebody wrote a book about that, didn't they,
Yeah,
Mike?
I think it was called Cyber Stiletto. I've got a copy of it right up there. I
Yeah,
can,
I do too. You can probably pick it out right on my
yeah,
shelf.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
So
so that
I
leads
guess
to
we were like
distrust.
what 13 years ahead of the what's happening today, right?
Yeah, yeah, you should see what we're thinking of now. So, anyways, that led to, especially in Europe, distrust of U.S. technology. So, there will be, if there are, I don't know how many tools you need. I'm trying to actually, I would love to be able to say that, you need 198 tools to have a good security. Um, if you want to, if you support the idea of buying locally because it's more trustworthy, then there should be a German, you know, company for firewalls, a German company for antivirus, German company for every single thing you can do in security. And of course, Germany's got a lot of cybersecurity companies, over 220,
Hmm.
but they don't have complete coverage. And they certainly don't have an alternative to Palo Alto Networks or Cisco. So they still buy a lot of U.S. products in foreign countries, but I'm finding that it's, maybe it's just because cybersecurity is one, such a problem, but two, needs solutions that people just keep coming up with solutions right and left. You would think that remember I used to work at Fortinet and
Hmm.
we'd sell a little tiny appliance that did everything for you, called Unified Threat Management, UTM appliance. And there are about 24 of those around the world. One of them is in Perth, Australia, and it's really cool and very effective. Red box from Red Piranha. And I don't know, I love finding these companies that are making a go of it and they're growing and successful in their region. And it's a regional thing. Fortinet just can't afford to open an office in Perth. So they're going to have salespeople introducing people to the wonders of Red Piranha's equipment in Perth, which is targeted by a lot of cyber attacks because of the mining industry there.
All right. So, you go on Amazon to find the book, but if they want to find you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn every day, so that's where you find me.